You saw the title, you clicked. You know what's to come. I'm not apologizing for it. But here's a disclaimer anyway. Before immediately sharing disdain for this topic or trope in the comments, and therefore possibly your disdain for me discussing it and arguing in favor of it for kicks, please do not assume that I'm not aware or compassionate towards the ramifications of colonialism, unfair power dynamics, genocide, eugenics, racism, colorism, tribalism, and all the things that come with those, and all the things that I may not have covered or listed. I'm aware, likely more than you'd guess, and I'm still making this. If this is a topic you take very close to heart, if it bothers you to the point of moderate or severe irritation or aggravation, this video just isn't for you. This is a simple analysis video from a simple analysis channel. You can share dissent or disagreement in the comments below. Of course, it's a free world, but save any anger that might arise for the next guy. Because obviously, if I'm making this video, not only is there a possessed awareness of the crowds of unfavorability on this pairing, any scolding in the comments from that crowd or for that crowd will do very little to change my mind, and likely others. In this, I could end up proving against my own point. I may not. I might be a hypocrite. I might not. I'm fine with either or. I'm human. Honestly, I'm just here for a good time and to be the spear in the bales of disagreement on this issue. So no threats, please. Or Cabbage Man will delete your comment and can't buy your place to sell. Thanks. Now, it's very popular to hate it. And many people act as though they could never guess why anyone would ever pair Zuko and Katara together. Some will argue, well, why does it matter who pairs who at all? It's not a real story about real people. It's not a historical narrative or a documentary. It's just an animated cartoon. It is a fictional show with fictional people, yeah, but the trope is real and based off of real aspects entrenched in the history of humanity and their recorded history, where victors overwrite false romances onto tales of enslavement, or tell stories of seduction that suppress the horrific truth of non-consensual, unwanted sexual abuse, assault, and confrontations onto a party with more disadvantages than the initiator. It's a touchy subject because even today, a lot of the general public still won't acknowledge such things. Not for the native genocide through colonial expansion, not for Western chattel slavery of African people, not for the various wars and conflicts of Indonesia and the Dutch, or child brides throughout several cultures, lands, and centuries, not for the French and Haiti, the Irish and the English, the Scottish and the English. Anywhere where one group somehow has power advantages over another, abuse takes place. And that abuse is minimized, if not outright excluded in our history books and our conversations on that history. But you know who doesn't forget about those things? The descendants of the oppressed party, the descendants of those who were subjected to said horrors. So that is one reason why a lot of people are hesitant to support this. Without a deeper look, if you're just taking the pairing surface level, it's easy to see how it could align with such trends in history. I would argue that the very fact that the idea of Zutara, a plot romance that was not really developed nor furthered in the animation or the comic series, a simple idea that lives only in the dreams and fantasies of people's minds, the fact that it has evoked such fervent responses and debate about this non-existent pairing is proof of not only people's dedication to historical empathy and accuracy on the true brutalities of what it means to dominate other nations, other people, but also it's proof in my mind of just how good the Avatar series was. If it wasn't good, who would really care? The fact that people are so fervent also hints to me that there is an awareness of the tension and possibility lurking underneath the surface for the pairing, and they're quick to strike that down. If this were truly a stupid, upsetting, exploitative, nonsensical pairing, I don't think nearly as many would care as much about how Zutara is viewed by the general public as they do now. But they do care. And so, I'm making this video. I will present each argument that we've all seen on the net against this pairing and counter them one by one. Then I'll put forth my own arguments. Anyway, disclaimer over. let's get into the details of this case. I'm ready for some fun. Argument number 1. Zuko is a colonizer.
What happened generations ago can be resolved now by you. Because of your legacy, you alone can cleanse the sins of our family and the Fire Nation.
Yes, Zuko was a colonizer. He's not any longer, but that's not the argument. Born of colonizers, essentially culturally brainwashed with a colonizer mindset, he was of little use to anyone but his nation that sought to dominate every other nation in the world. But how much time did Zuko actually spend with those colonizers? Actually spent colonizing other places in the name of the Fire Nation. It doesn't excuse him, of course. He had the nasty layout of a colonizer's mindset down, sure, but think further on it. For Zuko's sake, as a character who earned his humanity back in the end and has one of the greatest redemption arcs in animated television history. Zuko was not even born when the 100 Years' War began. That was started by his great-grandfather.
I've seen the colonies, Susan. How dare you occupy Earth Kingdom territory?
How dare you, a citizen of the Fire Nation, address your Fire Lord this way? Your loyalty is to our nation first. Anything less makes you a traitor.
Zuko was a child during the main campaign of Ozai to take over the world, during the 100 Years' War in general. He was born 83 years after the war was begun by his ancestors. He was 16 when it ended, thanks to help from him and the gang. He was born into it, just like everyone else, save for Aang. Not only was he not there at the start initiating the war, but he had no real leverage amongst the real colonizers of the day, even after being born into royalty. He was burned, disfigured, over simply having an opinion on military moves to colonize and attack a region of the Earth Kingdom. He couldn't even sway the council to save a group of their own soldiers, so what sway do you think he had besides sitting there looking pretty? Do you really believe that they let him participate on the actual field? General Zhao was active in this phase himself, and Iroh was colonizing before the both of them, losing his relish for it all after the death of his son. By the time Zuko was barely going into puberty, age 13, he had already underwent the Agni Kai and underwent banishment. So he had only his goal of the Avatar to focus on, not expansion or power, not killing or maiming or torturing or capturing or dominating other people in the name of the Fire Nation. I feel as though Zuko's the kind of person to run through locations, be an asshole, ask where the Avatar is, and then move on. Because that was his goal, to catch Aang. Even when he had hostages, he never killed or hurt them on screen, just threatened and harassed them. I'm not saying that makes him a good guy or better than the others. He was still terrible and had a lot of growth to achieve. But he's not a murderer. And being born in a system like that didn't inherently make him one, especially since he got cut off early from that system, unlike his sister. He had no influence in any arena of his nation, essentially being banished. All he had was a warship, a couple of troops, and Iroh. That's about it. And sure, he could do damage with them, but again, we never see him killing anybody on screen. It is likely because he was banished and sent away that he never became like the rest of his family. And it also helped that Iroh was there, which, by the way, Iroh's probably killed more people in the name of the Fire Nation than Zuko ever has. Though he hasn't romantically been tied to anyone outside the Fire Nation blatantly, he is more well received by the audience than Zuko, despite having laid sieges to cities and colonizing and warring in the name of Fire Lord Azulon. He's likely well loved because, like Zuko, he grew into a better person than what he used to be. But let's not forget that Zuko did the same. I get it. The stories we've seen on the subjugated paired with colonizers or oppressors in general often aren't well thought out, lacking awareness, rife with subtle and blatant issues that often disadvantage the oppressed party, and cheapen the struggle of that group as a whole in the name of romance. This could be because these stories are rarely ever written from the perspective of those in the oppressed party, and instead written by the descendants of the victors or neutral parties who are just there to see a forbidden romance, in the name of botching real historical stories. Due to this, things like this happen. Pocahontas goes from a 10-year-old kid who very well could have been assaulted or groomed by a 27-year-old colonizer, John Smith, to a young woman in love with a strange man from a strange land, ready to risk it all. Sally Hemings goes from an enslaved 14-year-old kid, forced or groomed into exploitation with a 46-year-old brutal slave owner, to a young woman struck by love for a master that she can never be with publicly, but meets in secret for their deep love. In her childhood, Mata Hari, renowned seductress and spy, goes from a child socialite preyed upon by her schoolmaster to a seductress of siren-like qualities, capable of bending any adult man to her will. Also, whatever this is there even a story behind this? Sick isn't the word for it. And if Powhatan people were able to widely tell the story of Pocahontas first, or if African Americans were able to tell the story of Sally Hemings first, both stories would be pretty different. But notice a pattern with the men listed in these kinds of false historical narratives. They have power, yes, but possess no desire to grow, to change, to be better, to practice what they preached in their time. It's their way, and it's God-given. Right? Wrong. Do these stories ever pick a guy who becomes super aware of what damage they're causing to others and their place in the world? Or do the guys just go with the times and force themselves and their will upon others in various ways, never once thinking about it? Do they ever teach themselves differently? Or are they forcing themselves on their quote-unquote love interests? Do they try to redeem themselves? Irredeemable, sure, but the lack of effort on their part is what's being highlighted. No, they don't. Does Zuko do any of these things for his own redemption? Did he look at his actions? Did he reassess what he believed to be his birthright, gave up his status and power for betterment and being a decent human being and so on? I'll leave that for you to decide. Argument number 2. Zuko is a colonizer and colonizers are killers. Zuko is a killer.
You're a terrible person, you know that? You're the Fire Lord's son. Spreading war and violence and hatred is in your blood.
Arguments against Zutara often imply that Zuko is inherently a murderer of other nations, and that he has murdered for the expansion of his own. I disagree. I don't really think Zuko has murdered anyone. Think about Zuko's character closely. Not only has he never killed anyone on screen or been implied to kill anyone off screen, though there has been quite a bit of maiming and third-degree burns, every chance he has had to kill people, opponents especially, he reels back every time. It is one of his most harped upon weaknesses in the show. It's why his father denigrates him at every turn, and a big reason why he burned half his face off at the age of 13. It's why Azula taunts him at every chance she gets.
That's it? Your father raised a coward.
Azula and Ozai both know that they have what it takes that Zuko inherently lacks: a brutality, a coldness, an utter lack of empathy, and a strong sociopathy to kill and destroy without feeling, without conscience. Their conscience is replaced by legitimate conquering and a colonizer's mindset. If anyone in that family were to write a manifest destiny notice for the world to see, it's those two. They believe it's their born right, divinely, God-given, to destroy and dominate other people at any cost. Ozai was willing to burn the world. Zhao was willing to kill the moon for the Fire Nation's expansion, willing to maim nature and spirit itself just to cripple the Water Tribe and gain an advantage. Azula was willing to kill her friends for betraying her. It's a big reason why Iroh kept taking chances on Zuko alone, knowing that Zuko had the potential for good in him. Zuko doesn't kill people. He can't, even when he wants to, even when he is certain that he should. So I'd be willing to bet Appa that Zuko didn't kill people during his campaign away from the Fire Nation to capture the Avatar. Now, during that campaign, did he harass, assault, and maim random tribes in search of the Avatar? Probably. Could he have indirectly killed someone by ordering to take prisoners? Perhaps, maybe, but I doubt it, since it's one of his largest weaknesses highlighted in the show. Surprisingly, Sokka has killed more people on screen than Zuko. And we all see Sokka as lovable. So what does that say for Zuko, and what does that say for us? Since it's a kid's show, Avatar casualties will be treated like Batman casualties or Spider-Man casualties. Realistically, they're killing hella people. But unless it's clearly outlined, we'll assume that all side characters survived by the grace of some miracle. Argument number 3. It's a bad example for romance in general. It's toxic. Romance, especially fictional romance, can exist outside of unrealistic and frankly boring vacuums where nothing is questionable, dubious, or dangerous. Don't take this statement to an extreme. I'm not pushing for I'm just saying that if you look at some of the best-selling romances of the past few decades, damn near all of them are dubious and have some things that aren't particularly squeaky clean in them, things that aren't socially acceptable, things we wouldn't admit we like consuming out loud, but behind closed doors, it's a feeding frenzy. There is a need, an audience, a hunger for these kinds of conflicting, complicated pairings and stories. Why? People like tension, danger, the forbidden. Not illegal forbidden, just morally questionable forbidden. Even that's debatable, but everyone's line in the sand is a little different, so let's just leave that there. The point is, if this stuff is so horribly unromantic, then why is that kind of romance always selling? Call Me by Your Name, Twilight, Gone with the Wind, Casablanca, Jane Eyre, The Notebook, Titanic, Beauty and the Beast. Sure, mature, non-toxic, tidy, neat relationships are possible, welcome, and celebrated in media. It can still be non-problematic and enjoyable and passionate and celebrated in media. Those kinds of relationships also sell well, and frankly, more are needed. But life, especially in the Avatar world, is about balance. It's not always happy tidings. Things don't always go according to plan. And in fantasy, in fiction, anything goes. The reason we like Avatar is because it can capture the grays of the world. It's not simply black and white. Villains aren't just bad. The good guys aren't just good. There's a lot of nuance. And it's with those nuances that we learn to fall in love with the show. And sometimes we fall in love in the strangest of places. Argument number 4. Zuko had Mai, and Mai is great. Yes, Zuko had Mai. Yes, Mai is great. Yes, their relationship is great. That doesn't erase the tension that there was between Zuko and Katara, just like how Katara and Aang being good together didn't erase the tension that she had with Jet or Haru. Argument number 5. Katara would never be with someone from a genocidal people that murdered her own mother.
What can I do to make it up to you?
You could bring my mother back.
Admittedly, Katara's mother's death had a profound impact on both of her children. Katara lived her life by doing what she thought her mother would have done, supported, or would have wanted. She wears the necklace, always. Her mother's death makes it hard for Katara to forgive. What people who argue this often seem to leave out is that Katara forgave Zuko, and not at the drop of a hat, after lots of painful double-crossing, boundaries, memories, and decisions. When Zuko joined the team, it took Katara a long time to even accept it or accept him. And she was within her right. Fire Nation soldiers killed her mom. Zuko was the son of the man who ordered it. And for all Katara knew, Zuko helped dispense the order. Deep down, she knows that he didn't really kill her mom. But it's what he used to represent, what Zuko used to do, what he used to support and believe in, that conflicts with her moral. Also, the fact that he already betrayed her once doesn't help. Katara was just going off of what she knew, and she knew not to trust the Fire Nation. That's what her mom would have wanted, right? Katara ultimately blames Zuko for her death. Well, that's just it. He's just a symbol that Zuko tried to prove again and again that he outgrew, that he no longer valued. Zuko didn't actually kill her mom, and now he was willing to dismantle the same empire that birthed him. That whole argument is done. She just projects onto him because he's the only firebender around. But we all get why. She's within her right. I'd guess that Sokka knew accepting Zuko in the group too soon, too openly, or forcing Katara to do so, even if it made the most sense at the time, would make his sister question his own love for his mother, something too painful for either to bear. So instead, Sokka advised Zuko from the sideline. However, Katara has a natural, forgiving, nurturing nature. She likes to help people and try to fix them. It wasn't long before she viewed Zuko's efforts as true. We see real change in their relationship after Season 3, Episode 16, The Southern Raiders, when she chooses to reopen the wound that is her mother's death and go in to clean it out and make peace once and for all in her own way. Vengeance. Zuko understands her and supports her the most. He knows what it's like to chase after a vengeance that knowingly won't soothe, but is almost primal intrinsically. A pain that deep to push a person like Katara to kill should not be underestimated. It's one of the only times she actually seems to be all right with killing, as well as Zuko. But, like water, Katara changes and shifts with her surroundings, and like water, she is powerful in all forms, all emotions. Her forgiveness is just as strong as her hate, and she proves it episode after episode. Now, mind you, I'm not a forgive automatically kind of person. I don't think forgiveness is a requirement to heal, or even always necessary for growth. So, what am I saying? That Katara forgave genocide and genociders for the hell of it? That we all do the same? No. Am I saying that we forcefully forgive our way out of pain and dispense that forgiveness onto those who possibly don't deserve it? No. I'm just saying to give Katara a little more credit where it's due. She decided when to keep Zuko out, and she decided when to let him in. And once he was in to stay. Katara released the tight grip she had on the trauma of losing her mother. Her mother is gone, and killing won't bring her back. That release makes space for Zuko in Katara's life. And on the topic of both of their mothers, who are both not present in the series, Katara's due to death and Zuko's due to vanishing. I can't speak for their moms, especially since we don't know much about either character, but I can speak from what I know, and I think a lot of viewers will agree. Both of their mothers seem like really good people. Both of their mothers seem like they love their children a lot and would give up a lot for their children. Katara's willing to die for her, and Zuko's willing to poison the most powerful person in her nation for her child, and willing to stay with someone she hated for him. So out of that love, I think they could manage accepting the partners that their kids chose. So I don't think Zuko's mom would care about him getting with Katara, and I don't think Katara's mom would care about her getting with Zuko, so long as they both actually loved each other and cared for each other. If her mother were present, knowing what we know from her on-screen appearances, she would want the best for Katara. She would want her daughter to be happy. I'd be willing to bet that if Katara brought Season 3 Zuko home, declaring her love for him, her mother would accept it. I also think Zuko's mom wouldn't care about them together either, wanting her son to be happy regardless of if it was with nobility, which Ursa herself was burned by, or someone from a different nation and a different class. Ultimately, Kaya and Ursa wouldn't care about their children's romantic choices. And those are the only people that Katara and Zuko really care about in the end. Argument number 6. Zuko is too old for Katara. During the series, Zuko is 16 and Katara is 14, 2 years apart. Katara is 14 and Aang is 12. I know he was frozen in a block of ice for a century. That doesn't count. He was in stasis mode. He hasn't grown physically or mentally. He hasn't developed. He hasn't socialized beyond 12. He's 112, but he's basically 12. So it's established. In Aang's case, 112 equals 12. That means, in essence, Katara is 2 years older than him. So why is it bad for Katara and Zuko, but not Katara and Aang when it comes to age? Is it because with Katara and Aang, she is the older party, and by being female, our society assumes better behavior and motivations on her end versus Zuko, who we assume otherwise? Is it because her mother figure over Aang makes audiences more comfortable when it comes to their romance, whereas Zuko doesn't give that paternal feel and doesn't need the same kind of nurturing from her that she dispenses to Aang. If anything, it would be a little less appropriate in the dynamic of Aang and Katara's case, just because Aang has had less experience with girls and socializing outside the traditional monks and monk kids in general. She is his first romantic influence, an older, more socialized one, even as someone who has been held to a village that was absent of all young men save for her brother. She's got more on Aang than he has on her, and therefore the dynamic's a little unbalanced. Does that mean I disagree with either? No. I think Aang and Katara are both fine. I don't see a problem with their relationship, but I also think Katara and Zuko are fine, and I don't see a problem there either. I just think we should remember both when it comes to the age argument.
What? Everyone else went on a life-changing field trip with Zuko. Now it's my turn.
My argument, number 1. We don't hear these protests with other pairings. For example, like Zuko and Jin, or Zuko and Sokka. What makes Katara not okay, but those guys are? I don't see people arguing in the comments of media of either two pairings like they do for Zutara. Is my OTP Zutara?
Yes. More or less.
Believe what you will. I just find it funny, especially seeing as how both Jin and Sokka are from nations subjugated by the Fire Nation. Sokka is even more of a curious case, seeing as how he went through the exact same situation as Katara. Food for thought.
Aang, I don't know.
Why don't you know?
This isn't the right time.
Well, when is the right time?
My argument number 2. Katara took a little longer to take Aang serious romantically, whereas with other characters, it was easier for her to do so.
The Avatar? Why, he's like a little brother to me. I certainly don't think of him in a romantic way.
Aang was not just desperate to become more mature to save the world and be taken more seriously as an individual as well as the Avatar. Aang also wanted to mature so that Katara would take him more seriously and stop mothering him, because he knew it was that mothering aspect in that relationship that blocked him from what he really wanted together with her, which was romantic intimacy. By mothering him, Katara infantilizes and somewhat emasculates Aang. And that's not to say he's a macho guy walking around needing her to need him so he can feel big and strong. That's not what Aang's about. That's not what his masculinity looks like, and that's not what I mean. But to be put in the place of a child takes away his more mature aspects in Katara's gaze, and he felt that. Which is why near the end, as his feelings for her grew, he pulled away more and more from her nurturing and coddling, not because there wasn't value in it or that he didn't appreciate it, but because he knew he wanted more, and in order to get it, he would have to grow up a little. Actually being younger than her didn't help much either. What did Katara's other interests have in common? Haru was older. Jet was older. Zuko is older, and none of them needed her as a mother, or even seemed to evoke that sense in her as much as Aang did, because she saw them as more as a match than someone to care for. And if we're being honest, all three characters, Haru, Jet, and Zuko, could have very well used mother figures, but the dynamic between them and Katara just started off quite differently. I don't think it's something inherent in Aang that makes Katara want to care for him so much. It's not that he's a hugely childish person, far from it. Don't let his light-hearted attitude and mischief fool you. I just think he's young, a close friend that's been through a lot with her and that is facing a lot ahead of him. She worries, and when she worries, she frets and coddles and nurtures. We don't really get to see Katara and Aang grow alongside one another as they both age and mature further. We miss out on those key aspects in the animated series, but we do get to see a glimpse of that between her and Zuko, fueling the fire.
We kissed at the invasion, and I thought we were gonna be together, but we're not.
My argument number 3, Aang was easy. Hear me again. Not that Aang was bad, not that the relationship was cheap, or not that their bond was useless. Aang was good. Aang was sweet, understanding, passionate, driven, initiative, vulnerable, and a great person all around. But he was also easy. And I think both characters kind of knew that. Easy how? No. Maybe? No. Just that everything for the two of them was pretty picture perfect. All the events divinely placed for them to be together. Even with their spats, their relationship is allowed time, energy, and circumstances to grow into what it could be. Being isolated with a select few other people can do that to a person. Make them imprint onto one person squarely and hyper-focus on them. What if Aang had more choices? And Katara too, who engaged in more of those choices than Aang, but regardless, he was in a block of ice for an eon, fresh from the monks, and Katara is powerful, gorgeous, kind, fiery. Who wouldn't fall head over heels for her? But that's just the thing. Who wouldn't? If Aang and Katara had less stress, more time, more options, would they have still chosen one another? Perhaps, perhaps not. Think about Sokka. He had Yue, and Yue was incredible for him, his first real romantic love. But she dies. Sokka grieves and eventually finds another, Suki. Suki is also fantastic for him, wonderful and amazing. But if Yue had never died, Sokka would have stayed with her and likely would have never met Suki. Still, if he had remained with Yue and met Suki, would that have erased any unspoken, unsaid tension or possibility that they felt around one another? And if they hadn't met, does that erase their compatibility entirely? Sokka isn't a cheater, just throwing it out there. He could love Yue and still have the ability to love another in the world. It's not a one and done thing. Think of Katara's future after the series. Badass, awesome, love-filled, kids, motherhood. Right up her alley, sure. She loves mothering. She likes big families. She likes caretaking. She even becomes a renowned master waterbender, the best healer in the world. Eat your heart out, Paku. But Katara is also deeply ambitious, a delegator, deeply involved in politics and ethics, and unafraid to work for a better world. Wouldn't she make a good politician? A great ambassador? If anyone could stand by the side of a Fire Lord, handle reparations and peacekeeping, resolve disputes, and work on making the world a better place to be in, couldn't it be Katara? Think about it. Leading into the next argument. My argument, number 4. Katara being Zuko's wife would help the Fire Nations repair the nations they wrecked campaign. Oh yes, I said it. Many people disagree with this idea, that the idea of someone from a colonized people standing next to the colonizer does nothing for the ruined nations and the Fire Nation colonies still residing in them. That Zuko wedding her would only further spur on the later Harmony Restoration movement and the new Ozai Society in the comics. When you look at it that way, sure. But it's not just a colonizer marrying the colonized. For one, it's a reformed colonizer, an empathetic humanist vowing to fix the mistakes that their forefathers made, something that real-world colonizers rarely, and I mean rarely, actually seek out to do. Zuko is not just giving people lip service, he's putting in the work. Hard, thankless work. And everything that goes wrong, he is to take blame for it, rightfully so. And it's not a colonized, but a master waterbender, a warrior, a veteran of the 100 Years' War, a battle strategist, an innovator of both bending, tactics, and planning. Katara knows how to not just bend elements, but people. She founds relationships in the most barren of places. She sways public idea however she chooses, by any means necessary. She is ethical and good to her core. A necessary ally to have in a mission where one is trying to right the wrongs of a world made divided. It's not Katara's job to fix the mistakes of Zuko's people and parentage, especially as someone who suffered so much loss, dedicated her innocence and childhood to the cause already. She deserves love and a family in peace. Still, knowing Katara, I just can't see her backing down from that in favor of herself. It wouldn't be selfish of her to do so, but Katara is so selfless that I think she'd find a lot of personal fulfillment and achievement in being able to make the world a better place for people in more ways than one. They would both go into it for the long haul, and despite the issues they'd both definitely face, I couldn't see any other person in Avatar aside from Aang or Iroh willing to fight to the very end for the good of the collective. So, I didn't end on a very loving note. Let's do one more argument. My argument number 5. The tension is palpable. You see it, I see it. The skinship, the conversations, the push and pull, the forbidden, the circumstances, the growth. This pairing is a seductive one, to say the very least. Dante Basco isn't crazy or insensitive for liking Zutara. He's just honest. And to be honest myself, I think if we were all a lot more honest, instead of blindly backing arguments for the fear of not looking like bad, ignorant, or cruel people, we would get a lot farther on the issues we really have to face in this world. I think if we were all a lot more honest, Zutara would be way more popular and less of a magnet of correction and criticizing people for simply liking a pairing. Now, that's not to imply that there's not true honesty in the discomfort or displeasure some may feel with this pairing. Of course that exists as well, rightfully so, but there's a case for the other side, for Zutara, and I'm not afraid to present it. Case closed. So, what do you think? Which pairings do you like and why? Agreements, rebuttals, opinions, ideas on the next video? Share your thoughts below, like for the algorithm, and subscribe. Until next time.